Hello everyone and welcome to our Tech Tuesday tutorials number 89. Today we explore a free tool for writing choose your own adventure stories called Twine. Now if you're the right age to have been a student in the 80s, you might remember choose your own adventure book series. These were fascinating in their novel approach to storytelling because you couldn't read them sequentially. In fact, you were given a warning not to read them straight through, but instead to follow the directions as to which page to read based on your choice. Interactive fiction? What? With the rise of digital media, hyperlinks have allowed us to link text to other things like more websites or other text or media. Teachers and even some streaming services have recently gotten back into the nonlinear storytelling with things like You vs. the Wild with Bear Grylls on Netflix. Or more recently, A Heist with Markiplier on YouTube.
Two choices in front of us. The dark tunnel that security guard just ran down from and then screamed and then died in. Or the light tunnel where there's possibly a end, which
are basically interactive fiction in video format. But what if your students could make these stories themselves? Writing nonlinear interactive stories has a lot of benefits. It allows the author to try out multiple plot lines, different characters, and explore the consequences of choice. What if the first choice in a story determined what point of view the rest of the story followed? Kind of like that romantic comedy starring Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth Perkins. I believe it was called He Said, She Said, where the first half of the story was told by her perspective and the second half of the story was by his. You might find a very different story down either path. What if you were to rewrite Groundhog Day as an interactive fiction story, where most of the endings just took you right back to page 1, with only a single one of the hundreds of endings actually ending the book? In a previous Tech Tuesday video, we explored how to do this with Google Slides and PowerPoint, respectively, but there are more tools at your disposal, each with their pros and cons. One that I find particularly interesting is called Twine. You can find Twine at twinery.org. I'll link it in the description. It's a free-to-use service that runs in your browser or can be downloaded for PC and Mac as well. It lets you use simple language to create links and choices, but also gives you a visual organizer to see your story structure as you build it, something that PowerPoint and slides cannot do. Twine can also introduce variables to store bits of changing information like names or attributes, items, or even abstract things like how many turns you have left, what your trust is with a certain character, how much stamina you may have, or how many victories you've achieved. So let's see this in action. We're going to go to Twinery. We're going to kind of get started there. If you go to just to twinery.org, you'll be given their main page here with an option to download it or use it online. We're going to use it online. And you just go over there and click on Plus Story. Now all of your stuff here is stored in your browser in your temporary files. If you clear your temporary cache, you also delete all of this. I'll explain later how to download your writing to a file and then you can import it at another time. So you start off with basic story and you get one passage at the beginning. You simply double click it or click on the little pencil icon and you type in what you might want to type in. So this is an ode to the first choose your own adventure story called The Cave of Time. It's the very first one that was made. And then at some point, you're going to give the reader a certain choice. Twine lets you do some basic editing using what's called markdown text. The easy thing to remember is that if you need bullet points, you just use an asterisk and then type. So we're going to give the reader a choice here. It says you wonder whether or not you want to try to walk back home via moonlight or whether to wait for dawn. So we could say, okay, we're going to, you decide to start back home. And then the other option is going to be to decide to wait. So how do I link these things then to another passage? The idea here is that each one of these choices takes you down a different path in the story. Well, it's pretty easy to do. In Google Slides and in PowerPoint, you have to then go create that slide for Start Back Home and then come back here and link them. That can be a little confusing to students because they have to kind of create their destination and then come back and link. And it can really get a little confusing in terms of where decision trees go. In fact, we usually encourage people to build decision tree graphic organizers so that they can see how their story is going to flow. Well, in Twine, you don't have to do that at all. It just kind of does it for you. In fact, you don't even have to create something to link to it. So I'm going to come in here and create a link called Start Back Home. You do that simply by using two of your square brackets to open it, and then you use two of the square brackets to close, and it tells it, I want a link to a passage called Start Back Home. And then we do here for decide to wait. Okay, when you're done, you really don't have to do anything to save it. You simply just come in here and hit the X button and it'll close it all out. But hey, look at here. You've got a beginning and you can move this sucker around. You've got these two arrows, which are two choices here, and these lead to two passages. Now those passages technically don't have anything in them yet. So we simply hover over this and hit the pencil icon, or we can double click on it and we just simply edit this passage. We erase what's there. By the way, if you hit erase and you have nothing on your passage, it will give you some formatting tips right here. So you can kind of learn some of the basics of Twine right here. Okay, so then we finish writing the rest of this page and we provide some sort of choice again for them to make. Go back to the cave. You don't have to have the passage you link to have the same name as your hyperlink. So the hyperlink may say continue on to the ranch, but I may want the passage to be called something else. If you would like to have a different name for the link than you have for the passage it goes to, you could type what you want the link to say, then use the pipe character, which is shift and the vertical bar. It's underneath your backspace key on your keyboard. And so you can then type in something else like that. And that will link to a passage called Back to the Ranch, but it will look like continue on to the ranch. So if I close that out and I take a look at this now, I can preview this. So notice that this is called Back to the Ranch, even though it says continue on to the ranch, but it's taking me to that page. This is important for in some cases if you want to give people a choice that you've already said before, you've already used before. So let's kind of preview this really quickly. I'm going to start at the beginning here and then just hit play. So we'll test the story starting from this location. Right, so this is what your story starts looking like, and don't worry about this. This is just in the preview, this little white section here. So you read it all out, and then you say, do you want to go back home or decide to wait? Now, we haven't developed decide to wait. If we went in there, you would see nothing here. There's always a back button, which is kind of nice. And then we're going to choose start back home. So again, we have our second passage, and we have our other choices. Notice it says continue on to the ranch, even though when I click on it, I'm technically going to the passage called Back to the Ranch. It may not be obvious to you, but you can basically freeform any of this stuff. For example, going back to the cave could go to another choice. You could just write in more content here. We're just going to put in some junk text to simulate something like that, and we can say, okay, so our choices here will be, maybe we give them three choices here. We can say take the left tunnel, take the right tunnel, or walk back outside. Maybe you got spooked. Okay, so you're not limited to two choices. You're also not limited to putting the options at the bottom. You can put them anywhere in the text. It doesn't really matter where. So now this branches out into three different ones. You might say that if they walk back outside, you're going to basically take them to the start back home section, so it kind of creates this endless loop or whatever. You can come in here and put in some junk text, and then let's say I wanted to take them back to that one. Well, it helps to know what that one's called, right? And so that one, if I go back and look again, was called Start Back Home, right? So we go here. So then we're going to put in the link here for Start Back Home. Notice that if you start typing the name of a passage, it will suggest it. So we'll use that one. They are case sensitive, so kind of getting the same pattern of whether or not you're going to use capitals or not. And once you get that link there, you could actually come in here and say, leave the cave, and then use the pipe to kind of name it. But you need to start off with that link for it to auto-suggest, and then you can come back and change the look of it. So I can look at it this way. So yep, that should take me back home. Let's try playing it from that location, testing it. Leave the cave takes us to that passage for start back home. And look at there, you can see the arrows take me here, an arrow takes me back here. So this is really powerful for kids because it's really hard for them sometimes to understand the web of decisions. I mean, you want to call it a tree, but it doesn't have to be. Things can link to anywhere else. You can have things link you back to the beginning like we were talking about with the Groundhog Day. Right, so that's the basics of Twine and how to get started with passages, how to get started with choices, how to get started with links, and naming your passages. This video is running long, so I will go into variables next week. But first I'm going to show you how to save this, because once the kids work on this, they're going to want to take it home. They're going to do something with this, right? So in order to save this work, it's stored in the cache of your browser. Again, you have to be on that machine. If you're on a Chromebook, they get wiped every day. So what do? Well, no fear, you can still do this. What you need to do is you need to click on this arrow next to the title, and you need to publish to file. Publishing it to a file will save it as an HTML file on your computer. Even on a Chromebook, Chromebooks have this temporary storage. Then you'll need to go into your Google Drive. Go into your Google Drive and go to New and File Upload and upload this file into your Google Drive folder, wherever you want. So just select the HTML file. Here's the thing. You can't view this HTML file in Drive, but it's there and it works. If you were to double click it, you see all the actual code of the HTML. In order to view your story, you'll need to download it and then open it up in your browser and it'll run. So the kids could download it to any other Chromebook, open it up, and be fine. They can't work on it because that's a sealed kind of exported copy. If a kid were to pick up a different Chromebook the next day and try to work on it, what they would need to do is they would then go into Twine, and they would start here and choose import from file, and that file would need to be on their computer. So for step one, they would go into their drive, they would right click and download that into their drive, and then they would come up here and import that file right there and grab it. It will ask them if they want to replace any stories with the exact same name, which is great. They could do that. Or you could say, don't replace any stories, and it will create a second copy of it and it'll have a date and timestamp. So they'll want to keep the most recent one, or they'll want to go in here and rename this one to Archive Wednesday or something, or a date or whatever else. They can do that. Personally, I think not overwriting and creating a new one is safer because it keeps archives. They also keep archives in their Google Drive too. And this is good too for a story writing or a teaching writing standpoint. If this is shared and they upload that file to Google Classroom, because they can submit files to Google Classroom, they don't have to put it in Google Drive. They could just submit it to Google Classroom as today's writing on my story, and you might have them submit every day so that you have a record of how that story has been progressing as they've been writing and doing more of it. So that's awesome. You can turn this limitation to your advantage, in other words, by just being a little bit creative on how you do that. Alright, so I hope you all enjoyed this video and I hope you found it useful, and if you did, click that like button. Why not support us? Click that subscribe button. Click on the bell icon to receive email notifications anytime a video goes up. Leave a comment or idea for a Tech Tuesday video below. Share this video with your friends, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.